Good evening, everyone. About to start in 1 minute. Hope everyone had a good day. So as I wait for 30 more seconds, once again, my name is Dana Puryear. I am a certified grief recovery specialist. This Facebook Live is sponsored by Corey's Corner, which is a support group helping individuals process grief and loss. Tonight's topic will be life experiences that can bring grief and or loss. And once again, the Facebook Live, please share it with individuals. Please watch it. Please feel free to write comments in the section so that other people can see what questions you have, and then so I can answer those questions as well. So I think my 30 seconds is up, and now I can begin. So like I said, tonight's Facebook Live is talking about life experiences that cause grief and loss. And so I'm not going to speak about spouses or family members or close friends because those are kind of common experiences that bring about grief and loss that most people are familiar with. But rather tonight or today, I would like to talk about other things that we often forget or don't understand or don't draw the connection that it causes us grief in our experiences. So one thing that I also wanted to make mention of with grief is that when we talk about grief, it's moving from like the mindset and moving into the heart, because it is an emotional reaction. And so a lot of times people want, and I said this before in one of the other lives, talking about like time heals all wounds, or kind of like get over it, or don't feel bad. And those are common misstatements to say to individuals who are grieving, because it puts it in a mindset of your head and not your heart, and not looking at the emotional triggers that it can produce. And so with that being said, in 2003, the Grief Recovery Institute conducted a study. And in this study, they looked at grief in the workplace. And they actually tallied up the cost of what it costs businesses annually as it relates to grief. And so I'm going to read you some of those numbers. And these are huge numbers. So death of a loved one annually costs $3.7 billion. Divorce in the workplace costs businesses $11 billion. Family crisis costs businesses $9 billion. Financial loss, American businesses $4.5 billion. The death of a colleague, a friend, a family member costs American businesses $7 billion. Major lifestyle alterations, $2.4 billion. Loss of a pet, $2.4 billion. And any other loss at $1.2 billion. And as a total of all of those grief instances, there is a total of $75.1 billion annually that American workplaces lost money because, or it costs them money to actually deal with and process grief in their workforce. And so when we talk about grief in the workplace, that can look at increased alcohol use or increased drug abuse. It could be loss of work time. So that can also lead into lack of concentration, because it is commonly known that those individuals who deal with grief and loss have a loss of concentration. So that can be carried over into the workplace as well. And then also including stress. So now I want to go through the list of human experiences that can lead to grief and or loss. And I want to go through the list, and as things come up for people, please write them in the comment section. If something is not quite sure of what that life experience is, let me know, and then I can provide some clarity. There's already people talking about the loss of a pet and how much it costs. Yeah, so that's on the list as well. So I'll get to that in a minute, AB. Okay, so divorce. Divorce is a human experience that causes grief and loss. Part of that divorce is also marital separation. Imprisonment. Imprisonment can be a grief and loss of a human experience. Then personal injury or illness. And I'm going to go into that later on. We're talking about personal injury. I'll go into it now. Okay, so personal injury, it can also be the loss of a body part or loss of control of a body part. So sometimes men and women grieve over hair loss. An amputee can grieve over, the removal of a body part. That can create grief and loss. Marriage, when we said before about divorce. So divorce can cause grief, even a marriage. And often people don't think about marriages causing grief, but not just talking about the wedding causing grief and loss and the financials of that, but also changing from singlehood to marriedhood and what that can bring about in terms of grieving over a single life or grieving over having to now work in a partnership in a marriage. Dismissal from work. And I'm going to talk about work again. I just go all through the work stuff. So with work, it could be dismissal from work. It can be a business readjustment. And a business readjustment can also be a merger, or it could be a closing of a business. Those human experiences can cause grief. I think there's one more business. Oh, change of line of work. That's what I wanted to say. So if you got a promotion or you got demoted, that can also cause grief. Any other businesses that I can think of? If I do, it'll come back up again. So I talked about the businesses. Oh, also with businesses, retirement. That can cause grief. And a lot of people, I think with marriage and with retirement, people think of it differently and like, oh, I don't understand how it can cause grief. But in retirement, it could also be you've worked for 30, 40 years and you're grieving over the fact that you're no longer working. Or you're grieving over the fact that you put all these years into this business and now someone else is controlling what you already built. So retirement definitely can be one of those things that create grief and loss. Change in health. So that can be a change in health of you or change in health in your family members. Pregnancy and sexual difficulties. Those can play a role in our human experiences in terms of grief and loss. Family members, either the gain of a family member, and that can also look like blended families. So if blended families come together, that adjustment is one to look at in terms of processing or looking out for grief within those individuals. And children, one thing I want to stop and say too, that children do grieve. And so oftentimes when we look at even the death of a family member or the death of a pet, children still grieve. I remember when I was in the school system, children could not even focus on schoolwork because their pet had passed away. And the kids were grieving, and it showed up even in school time. And so I talked about death of pets, but that's definitely something that just stop and say that kids do grieve. So please be mindful of not just trying to replace it with pets or just trying to downplay even the death of a human being to kids, because they need to feel comforted as well. So just be mindful of kids. Financial states. So especially in 2008 when we had the huge financial crisis, there were major businesses who sought after grief counselors to process with their employees about the loss of their financial status. And so financial gain or loss can be something. And we're going to talk about that too. I'll talk about it now. I don't know why I keep talking about I talk about it later. We're going to talk about it now. So with the financial state, it can also be with mortgages. It could also be with a major loan or mortgage that you have. That can produce some grief for you as well. I already talked about the different line of work, change of work responsibilities, children leaving home. So as a parent, a lot of people get excited now that the kids have left the nest, but in that too, grieving and dealing with the silence of the house as a result of that. I'll get to all, let me stop now and get to some of the questions. So if there was any questions on any of those human experiences that I already stated, please put those questions in the comment section, because I'm going to read some of them for clarity or to say some things that I didn't say, but I still have another list that I want to get into, but I want to stop there and read some things and say hello to some people. Loss of pets in the billions, yes. So that number again, loss of pets cost American businesses $2.4 billion just on the loss of pets. And you also have to understand, pets, not just like emotional pets, because that plays a part too, but it's emotional pets, and then it can also be just regular household pets. Yes, El Chapo had LD, and that played a big part in his being. Yes, so AB was talking about ED, which is a sexual, as I said before, sexual difficulties. Those can definitely play a part as well. Okay, I said it. Yes, so the absence of a parent can definitely bring about grief, and even the reintroduction of a parent, even as an adult. So not just looking at the age of the child, but just parent and child relationship. So the absence of a parent definitely brings about grief, and also the reentry of the parent and child relationship can cause grief, and processing that is as well. So not just younger children, but just adult children reuniting with their parents, or the loss of the absent parent as well. Yes. He had a pet snake. Okay, so AB was saying that his son had a huge issue getting over his pet snake. Snake, cats, dogs, fish, it's all related. Any other? Okay, and so there's one more until I go into the next list. So it was made talking about, which is very much, I've seen this as well, re-entry. So any individuals who are incarcerated, because I did talk about imprisonment. So not just when they are locked up, but also when they are released, that it can create this process of it's a change in situations, which I'm about to hit into in a minute, which is change of residence, but it can also be change of lifestyle, which is adjusting to coming back into, the environments of people, places, and things, and how that relates into measuring up. So, and that's what I'll get into now, which is change of work responsibilities, which I think I did. Children leaving home. Troubles with in-laws. Outstanding personal achievements. And for the adults who are watching this, there are some individuals who definitely pride themselves on their achievements. And then even when they haven't met those achievements, either the ones that have been put on them or that others have put on them, can result in grief and loss. A spouse either starts or stops work. So I talked about retirement, but it can also be that individual going back to work. So it can also look like paternal leave or maternal leave. So when a new child has been born and that individual goes on leave, whether it's the grief of leaving the work, or it could be the grief of coming back to work. So I'm now leaving my child to come back into work. That also can create grief and loss. Begin or end in school. I think that is an important one to all of the students. Whether it's, and I've seen this happen once again in the school setting, where there is a promotion to the next grade, and you usually see it with the 8th graders going into high school, because they move from being in the top of their school, of being in the senior group and of the 8th grades, and then they now have to move and being the freshmen, being at the bottom. So if you have young kids, be mindful of that transition from middle elementary school into high school, and then once again from high school to college. That can definitely look at grief. Even breaks, whether it's the holiday break, whether it's the summertime break, that can be the starting of school. That can be looked at. For college students, not graduating on time could be something that I have talked to individuals about. Changing of majors or having to figure out what major to pick has caused individuals the experience of loss. Living conditions, and I talked about this in terms of imprisonment, but it can also be talked into just going from place to place, apartment to apartment, house to house, and that living condition, or going from a house to a shelter. Those are real life situations as well that need to be monitored and looked at. Trouble with boss, I forgot that in the category of the businesses, but whether you have a new supervisor or you're a supervisor and you have a change of direction on what things are supposed to be, that could be an issue. And I said residence, change of school, recreation, changes, and faith-based. So if you switch your faith-based affiliation, that can cause some grief. I talked about mortgage, sleeping habits, or eating habits. So oftentimes what happens with grief is that some people can even overeat or overeat. And that can affect their emotional state. And then lastly, vacation, holidays, Christmas, Easter, Passover, all of those holidays. I talked about this in the last Facebook Live, was holidays and triggers. And during those triggers, which can be holidays, can bring about new grief or old griefs that have come up for people. And then any violation of the law, whether it's a parking ticket, to felonies, any kind of violation of law can be affected. And so this last category is also kind of hits the emotional chords as well, but it's loss of trust. And when I say loss of trust, it can really be that broad. It could also be, in terms of loss of trust, it could be a couple and one couple cheated on the other person. So that loss of trust, and I'll just add this as a side note, which has nothing to do with grief, but something that was said to me, which is love is stronger than trust, and that love can endure so much, but trust is fragile. And fragile, when applied with pressure, sometimes it's hard to put the pieces back together. And so part of that is that stage of grief. Loss of approval. And that could be loss of approval in a family setting, or it could be loss of approval in the workplace as well. Loss of safety. So loss of safety could be, let's say in the workforce, it could be like a slip and fall. So you were at your job and, there was some water on the floor and then you slipped and fell. That loss of safety can come up. The loss of safety can also be like in a chair. If you're at work and you sat in the chair and you fell out of the chair, then everyone in the workforce, saw you fall out this chair. So that loss of being safe in your environment. And that can even go further in terms of loss of safety. Can also go into any rapes or molestations. So that loss of safety are where individuals have to process their level of grief. And then I said before, loss of control of a body part are definitely things that people use, with that loss of the body part affecting their grief. So those were over 40 different human life experiences that we have in life that oftentimes result in grief and loss. And so one of the things that I just wanted to end with in terms of the workplace with grief and loss is that right now there are companies give between 3 to 5 days as a time off for grief. And that time off is usually only for like spouse, a child, or a grandparent. And depending upon the workplace, it may include cousins. But there were also some studies that were done that were saying that at least 20 days is needed to process grief and loss. And so there's a huge advocate to push for increasing those days, but also to give out the information to businesses so that they understand that when an individual has experienced a loss, coming back into the workforce can definitely affect productivity and mindset and emotional state in working. And oftentimes, people say when it goes back to the workforce is that, the supervisors are like, okay, either we could do that could help you. But then 30 days later, the supervisor thinks that everything should be fine now and that it should be over things. And so if you are a supervisor or you have a coworker that has experienced any of these experiences that I mentioned, or the death of a parent, a loved one, a spouse, just take some time into being with that individual to help them go through this process. Because like I said before, it's an ongoing process, and time does not heal all wounds, but action and time together can help on the healing journey. So if there are any other statements that people want to share, please feel free to put those in the comment sections. If there were things that people wanted me to clarify in terms of the things that were listed, please let me know that as well. and I'll see if there was anything in the comment section that I overlooked. Oh, so the pet, it was a lizard and a snake combined. Got it. Clarity on that. Okay, so I don't see any other questions or any other clarifying things that are needed. So once again, my name is Dana Puryear. I am a certified grief recovery specialist. I just shared with you a list of over 40 different life experiences that can bring about grief and loss. And that in 2003, there was a study that was done to look at grief in the workplace. And annually, it was $75 billion that companies had to spend money on as a result of grief in the workplace. So feel free to share this with other individuals. Feel free to contact me in the comment section below, and then I will also post the next support groups and the next topic that I will be presenting on Facebook Live. I hope everyone has a good day, and I look forward to seeing everyone next time. Bye-bye.